Good morning. Special Advisor for Global Youth Issues, Rabens, Model UN Secretary General, Tima McDoshie, delegates and friends. You know, this is the second year we've had a talented woman as our Secretary General. Perhaps the UN in New York should take note of this. Good morning, everybody. On behalf of the United Nations Association of the National Capital Area, it's my privilege to convene the NCA's 13th Global Classrooms Model United Nations Conference. This is the highlight of our year-long Global Classrooms programming in middle and high schools in the District of Columbia, the state of Maryland, and Northern Virginia. Let me begin by thanking our partners, the U.S. Department of State, Secretary John Kerry and his staff, Assistant Secretary for International Organization Affairs, Lashiva Crocker, Public Affairs Director Mark Schlechter, and the Pan American Health Organization for hosting this event. Please read Secretary Kerry's inspiring message in your program. And special thanks to the NCA staff led by our Executive Director, Paula Boland, our Director of Global Education, Megan Penn, who you'll hear from shortly, Vice President for Education and Programs, Jesse Nicholson, and our Global Classrooms Program Assistants who are listed in your program and have worked really hard to make this a successful conference. We're most grateful to the teachers, policy advisors, and rapporteurs, and the hundreds of volunteers who have worked year-round to make this day possible. And a special shout out to our sponsors and donors, the United Nations Federal Credit Union, Airshoot, Morgan Stanley, the Communication Workers of America, the law firm of O'Melveny & Myers, Starbucks Coffee, and the other sponsors who are listed in your program. Thank you. Most importantly, though, I want to thank you, the delegates, who have been selected because you have worked hard and demonstrated your skills in analysis, advocacy, and negotiation as you have grappled with the challenging issues in this year's Global Classrooms curricula: climate change, Syria, World Heritage Sites, nuclear non-proliferation, and fair trade. Great work, delegates. You are here because you understand the challenges your generation will face as you complete your education and embark on your careers in this interconnected global community in which we all live. As tomorrow's leaders, you will need to think globally and act globally and locally as well. You, the delegates, understand that the United States is no longer a self-contained, isolated landmass protected by two great oceans. The challenges you face are truly global in nature: climate change, ethnic and religious conflict, terrorism, rising tides of migration and refugees, extreme poverty, and growing economic inequality, to name just a few. These challenges do not stop at sovereign borders. These issues can be addressed successfully only through global cooperation. And the United Nations is the global institution that engages all sovereign nations in meeting these challenges. In this, its 71st year, the United Nations has never been more needed than it is today. With the support and leadership of the United States, last December, the United Nations brought together in Paris all the nations of the world to agree on a framework for addressing the challenge of climate change. But it will be your responsibility, delegates, to follow through on these aspirational goals of what we call COP21. It may be as simple as remembering to turn off the lights when you leave your home. Under the leadership of UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon, the General Assembly has called upon all of us to set achievable goals for the international community over the next 15 years, working with civil society and the private sector to make measurable progress in such issues as the empowerment of girls and women and the eradication of extreme poverty. Please read the Secretary General's thoughtful message in the program that you have with you today. And delegates, again, it will be your responsibility, the responsibility of your generation, to make this vision of the United Nations a reality. So thank you, delegates, for getting an early start on the responsibilities you will bear as we pass the torch to the next generation of leaders. We're counting on you. We are confident that you will do a better job than my generation in leaving this a better world than you found it. It's now my pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker, the Special Advisor for Global Youth Issues, Andy Rabens, located in the Office of the Undersecretary of State for Public Diplomacy. Special Advisor Rabens focuses on helping the U.S. government better engage young people internationally to help solve the pressing challenges of today and to build greater global connectivity and networks to shape a better future. In the U.S. State Department, he has worked previously on Middle East, European, and African affairs and public diplomacy. And prior to joining state, he worked for California Senator Dianne Feinstein and for the Right Honorable Ed Miliband of the UK Parliament. He was named one of the top 99 foreign policy leaders under 33 and is a graduate of Harvard University and the London School of Economics. I couldn't think of a more suitable speaker to be with us today as we engage the next generation of leaders in the challenges we all face. Let's give a warm welcome to Special Advisor Andy Rabens.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Blair. Appreciate it. Well, good morning. How's everybody feeling? Good? You guys get any coffee drinkers in the room? I won't tell your parents, I promise. Any Mountain Dew drinkers? I regrettably actually have a Red Bull over there that I don't tell my parents about that. I'm feeling energized today. And I'm really thrilled to be here to help kick off the start of Global Classrooms DC Model UN Conference. And my plan is to talk for a few minutes up front before we open up to a larger Q&A. Does that sound okay? All right. So let me begin by very quickly thanking Ambassador Bliss for the warm introduction. Let me thank the great team at UNA for all of their work in Global Classrooms DC for putting on this amazing event with colleagues from the US Department of State. I'd also like to recognize Tima, who you're going to hear from very shortly, for her great work that she's done over the last year as Secretary General. But most importantly, as Ambassador Bliss mentioned, I want to thank you all for being with us today, for taking the time to come through security about 15 minutes ago, for working on some complex, challenging issues and coming up with actionable solutions that hopefully you all are going to be sharing later today. Now, if you haven't noticed yet, we've got an incredibly impressive group of young people in this room. If you just raise your hand, we're the middle schoolers. If you're in middle school, raise your hand. Awesome. How about the high schoolers, the high school leaders? Awesome. How about, are there any fifth graders with us? All right. Fifth graders. Now, who is here for the first time at the Model UN? Who is a first timer for Model UN? Awesome. And how about, we're the grizzled veterans of Model UN? Awesome, we got a few of them, good. Now, who won the Model UN lottery and gets to be Djibouti for the day? Good, we got a few Djiboutis. I remember when I was growing up, Djibouti was always the one that everyone wanted because there were a lot of UN puns that you could use for Djibouti. Who's representing the US? Good, we got some people representing the US. It's gonna be a good day. Well, as Ambassador Bliss mentioned, my name's Andy Rabens, and I serve as a special advisor for global youth issues here at the State Department. And I've got to be honest with you all and say that I've been incredibly excited and looking forward to talking to you all for some time. Because you may not all realize it, but you all represent incredible power and potential to help us solve some of the pressing challenges that we face today. And even more importantly, as young leaders from Washington, D.C., growing up in our nation's capital, and also Maryland and Virginia, like it or not, you guys are examples for the rest of the world. So we need your leadership on your campuses, in your communities, and in our countries, starting right now. So today, I want to focus on two main topics. First, I want to talk with you all and urge the need to unlock your voices and share the unique perspectives that each of you have on some of our pressing challenges, both internationally and also locally. And second, I want to urge you all to apply your Model UN skill sets of empathy, of problem solving, and of consensus building to your daily lives. And be the leaders and bridge builders that we so desperately need right now. Now, I remember back to my first Model UN and being in some of your shoes for the first timers. Granted, those shoes were Allen Iverson's and not anything to no LeBron James or Kevin Durant at that time. And granted that I had a Motorola pager, if anyone knows what that was, strapped to my belt instead of a slick smartphone in my pocket. But I remember our team getting Jordan as our country, a place that I, at the time, could barely locate on the map. And I remember being struck by fear, struck by a little bit of fear. Fear of having to develop an opinion on a challenging topic from the shoes of a place that I knew very little about, and by the fear of potentially having to speak up publicly in an eventual Model UN on that issue, representing Jordan. And I remember wanting to sneak away, and leave the Model UN club on the spot. Luckily, a good friend convinced me to stay, and we ended up diving right into the work. And over a span of a few months, we tried to understand the issues, we tried to understand the points of view of Jordan, and eventually, when Model UN came around, we were able to pretty effectively represent Jordan and bring some of our own unique views, ideas, and opinions to a challenging topic of Middle East peace. The two lessons I took away from Model UN were, one, that I had a unique perspective to some of the pressing challenges that we faced at the time. And two, that these tools that we're learning through Model UN of empathy, putting yourselves in the shoes of others, of problem solving, figuring out where overlapping interests might align, and consensus building, bringing people with different views together, that these were powerful skill sets that could be applied both inside and also outside of your classroom. I couldn't help thinking about the possibilities of applying some of the same techniques and tactics that we did with Jordan to our playground, and trying to actually understand the viewpoints of different groups, of different crews of people, of different cliques, and trying to see the world through their eyes. And using some of the same problem-solving skill sets to come up with ways to build consensus and to bridge some of these disparate groups. It turns out that Model UN skill sets actually have a lot of application in our daily lives and in our communities. So we're here today not just to meet some interesting folks, which I know you will, or to get a taste of multilateral diplomacy that will hopefully inspire some of you to pursue careers as diplomats, but also to empower your voices and build the skill sets that can better enable you to be leaders inside and also outside of the classroom. The Model UN skill sets of empathy, of problem solving, and of consensus building are going to help you be bridge builders in all walks of your life. And the good news is that you've got plenty of opportunities to practice these skill sets. When disagreements arise about what movie to go watch, when you've got to reach into that Model UN bag and pull out your consensus building strategies. When different groups of friends are having trouble getting along or making jokes at the expense of others, you've got to reach back into that Model UN bag and pull out your empathy strategies. Consider the feelings of others. Put yourself in their shoes. Understand the perspectives of all sides. And when a friend is being lured down a negative path, well, you've got to reach back in again to that Model UN bag and pull out your problem-solving strategies and help figure out a way to push them back down a more positive pathway. Leadership starts in the classroom. It then expands to your community. And then it expands to our country as a whole. And from reading many of your bios, your biographies, a sense of what you do in the school you go to, reading some of the policy proposals that I know you have already put forward, there's no doubt that you all are already leaders. So I've got 3 closing asks for you. 3 asks. First ask is to make sure that your voices are heard and that you speak up even when you're afraid that your voice or opinion won't be counted. Everyone's voice counts. And it is up to all of us to make sure that those voices are counted and heard. You don't have to be from a certain neighborhood, wear certain clothes, be seemingly perfect in every aspect of your life to be a leader or to have your voice heard. We need your voices. Ask number 1. Ask number 2, to make sure that you utilize your Model UN skill sets as bridge builders in your community. And that means, in practice, exploring new parts of the city. That means connecting with new groups of people at school, even if they may look or sound differently from you. That means trying to find new ways to build consensus among different groups of people and to continuously encourage inclusive environments to be formed. And last but not least, the third ask is for you to be ambitious about your futures. I'd love nothing more than to hopefully work with many of you down the road as diplomats. Don't let anyone tell you that anything is not doable or possible. Or most importantly, that anything can't be done. Because one of my mentors, one of my heroes, not mentors, I should say, heroes, someone who I looked up to, who I'm sure many of you know incredibly well from the textbooks, the late, great Nelson Mandela, has a pretty good quote that he said often, and some of you may already know this. He often said that it always seems impossible. Anyone know the rest of that? Until it is done. It always seems impossible until it is done. So take that mentality as you move forward from these halls in this day. So thank you all so much for your time, and I look forward to a little question and answer going forward. I think we have a few minutes for Q&A? We got a few minutes for Q&A, so I think we have a couple of microphones here, and if anyone wants to be bold and ask the first question, feel free to come up. Please, why don't you come up to the microphone over here if you can. And just introduce yourself very briefly.
I'm Alex Cooper. What is the greatest challenge you've faced in your career?
Oh, wow. That's a good question. That's a tough, hard-hitting first question. Greatest challenge of my career. I think the greatest challenge of my career actually is something that started when I was much younger than you all. I may look like I'm comfortable speaking up here at the podium, but I actually had a pretty serious lisp as a kid. And my parents, who I love to death, named me Andrew. And it just so happened that the hardest letter combination for me to say was the DR sound, the dr sound growing up. So I would freeze up every time we go around the circle when I tried to say my name, Andrew, because it came out Andy. And I got teased constantly growing up. Or Andu, it came out Andu when I tried to say Andrew. I eventually changed my name in 3rd grade to Andy, and I've spent a lot of time trying to feel like I have a voice and that I feel confident enough to speak in a group setting, or even more importantly down the road, in a more public setting. So I think one of the challenges for me has been overcoming some of my own internal fears. Anyone else in the room at one point in their life a little afraid of public speaking? Okay, good. You know the number one fear of people around the world? Public speaking. Number two fear? Anyone know? Heights? Good one? No? Death. Who said death? All right. Number two fear is death, so people are more afraid of public speaking than dying. Who knows Jerry Seinfeld? Jerry Seinfeld, I don't know if you've seen this routine, but he has a great stand-up routine where he talks about if we were all at a funeral right now, and that somebody was in the casket next to me, that most of us in the room would prefer being in the casket than at the microphone having to give the eulogy about the person who just died. So that's a natural thing. So I think overcoming some of your fears and trying to figure out what are the things that you're going to need to develop skill set wise to be able to have the types of positions and roles and careers that you all want. So I think that's, for me, the toughest challenge. Please.
What inspires you to do your work every day as good as you can?
That's a good question, too. I think it connects, for me, to the story I told you minutes ago about trying to find my own voice and feeling that it turns out talking to friends and talking to people when I get the chance to travel overseas, that's a pretty common thing. That a lot of people, it turns out, need to have a little bit of a push or help unlocking their voices. And I found a role at the State Department where I can actually, day to day, try to help and work with a lot of young people overseas and sometimes in the United States to help them feel more comfortable unlocking their own voices. So that's kind of what gets me up in the morning, is the idea that this is, I see my own struggles from before and a lot of the people that I have a chance to work with overseas. And I think the other thing is I get really inspired by seeing young leaders like yourselves and others doing amazing things all over the globe. What else, please?
Hi, I'm Maria. When and how did you get interested in diplomacy and international relations?
That's a good question. So growing up, actually, I wanted to be a professional athlete when I was younger. I thought I was going to be a professional tennis player, and that was where I was going. I wasn't tall or quick enough to be a basketball player, which I really wanted to do, but tennis was a good backup. And then when I was a freshman, the first year in college, 9/11 happened. And it raised a lot of questions for me about the larger world that we live in, about foreign affairs, about the countries that I hadn't really had a lot of experience understanding about. And I ended up enrolling in a couple of classes where I really got the bug. I got bit by an international relations bug, and then did Model UN and found opportunities to hear incredible speakers and got inspired to try to understand how the world was interconnected. And I think seeing that there was a lot of interaction and possibility for a greater connection across boundaries was something that kind of got me more excited about this international space. Please.
How did you, oh my.
It's okay.
How did you get into the State Department?
How did I get into the State Department? So I think hopefully there's going to be someone, or there'll at least be some handouts today that are going to talk about different ways of getting into the State Department. And I would love nothing more than for any of you all too to think about careers at the State Department, to think about internships at the State Department, to think about going overseas and talking to youth counterparts in different parts of the world. For me, I got into the State Department after graduate school. I had done an internship at the State Department in college, and then after graduate school was able to come in through a program called a Presidential Management Fellowship program that happened to allow you to find a job opportunity right out of grad school. But there are a whole bunch of different opportunities, and I really hope that you guys will think about diplomacy as a real career. Well, I think we have time for just a few more questions. Please.
I'm Leah Freisinger from Bell's Mill. I'm doing Japan UNESCO, and my question is, what was the favorite country you ever did in Model UN?
Ooh, as I mentioned earlier, I always wanted Djibouti. I think there are a lot of different Model UN countries that everybody hopes for. I think the most rewarding ones for me have been ones that I didn't expect to like, or I didn't know much about. But then when you actually delve into the work, you find, like a Jordan, for example, you find out a whole lot of amazing things about the role they play in the region of the Middle East, North Africa, their larger role in the world, and you end up having a lot more respect for the people and the country that you represent. I ended up having a chance to live in Jordan even when I started working here, and it connected me back to my Model UN days when I didn't even know where that place was on the map. So I think probably Jordan, was probably my favorite, but I think some of the Model UN countries where you can do some good puns, I think are also big favorites of the group as well. Well, who do you have? Who's your?
Japan, and I'm in UNESCO.
Okay, great. Thanks, Leah.
Thank you.
All right.
Hi, I'm Zach from, I'm doing China with my friend Ethan, and we're doing nuclear nonproliferation. In this conference, what do you think would be more valuable, a child's perspective on a problem or trying to do an adult's perspective on a problem?
So I would think, and I wouldn't consider you guys, I'd consider you guys young leaders. I wouldn't say, we define, for State Department, we define youth up to 35. So we have a broad range for young people. And Ambassador Bliss just mentioned we were thinking of even expanding to make sure that he can make the cut. So we're thinking about raising it even higher. But what I would say is that I think you need to bring your own perspective. I think you all have perspectives right now that are actually incredibly useful for an issue like non-proliferation, an issue like Syria and the refugee crisis, an issue like countering violent extremism. I think you have perspectives right now on the pressing issues of our time. And I don't think you need to sit at the kids' table. I mean, you're ready for the adult table, and to actually be pushing your ideas, opinions, and analysis of these issues. And frankly, some of the ideas that are going to come out of this, I think some of the folks here at the department might end up even using in some of their analyses and policy perspectives going forward. So I would say, take your own perspective, be the diplomat at the highest level of the UN tackling these issues, but bring some of your own perspective and lens to those challenges. Good luck. Right over here.
My name is Kaleem, and my question is, what are some of the ups and downs of your career?
Ups and downs. I think there are a lot of ups and downs. I think there are a lot of times I applied to the State Department before I got in. I think I maybe applied about somewhere between 50 to 200 times, different applications. And I think, one of the things that I've learned is that, same with even moving around a particular bureaucracy, I think you have to be willing to put yourself out there and be willing to see what might look like a failure or a misstep to some people as a learning experience, and something that ultimately you can laugh about, talk about, and makes you a stronger person. So I think kind of coming in with a mindset that at all levels of a place like the State Department, you're having an impact. It doesn't matter what your role is, and then once you get into a place, then figuring out if there's a different area that you want to play. So kind of keep pushing and being true to where you're looking to go.
Okay, thank you.
You bet. We'll take one more. Last question. We'll go right. We'll take both, and then I'll answer them very quickly. Last two.
I'm Micah from Inspired Teaching School, and I am Canada in UNEP.
Great.
And my question is, do you think it's easier to ask a question or answer a question?
Ooh. I don't know. That's a good one. Well, let me take this one too, and then let me get back to you on that.
My name is Sana, and my question is, if you were one of us, what category would you want to do?
It's a good question too. Okay, very quickly. What do you think? Would you rather ask that question, or would you, Micah, would you rather answer the question you asked, or would you rather have asked that question that you asked earlier? I'm going to throw it back on you.
It's very hard.
I think it's fun to ask a question if you can get some good info out of the question, if the person actually answers the question that you ask. I think too often, sometimes, maybe even at the UN, in politics, I think questions are asked and then people end up trying to answer a different question than the one asked. So I think answering a question, at least you have the chance to frame the issue you're talking about, but it's incredibly important to ask pointed, short, insightful questions as well. So that's a really good one. And Sana, is it Sana?
Sana.
Sana. In your question, one more time.
What category would you want to do?
What category would you want to do? I think different categories are going to bring something different to the table. Maybe you want to kind of focus on the Security Council one year, and next year you're doing ECOSOC. Next year you're doing the some non-proliferation stuff. I think having a variety of experiences, in my view, I think is probably a pretty good way to go, unless already you're feeling that I'm passionate about science, or I'm passionate about the Syrian refugee issue, or I'm passionate about education as a whole. I think be true to what gets you excited, and then try to focus on those issues going forward.
Thank you.
All right, I'm going to turn things back over to Megan. Thank you, guys. Good luck today.
Let's give one more round of applause, please, for our keynote speaker, Special Advisor Andy Rabens. I'd like to also thank all the students who came up and asked some really great questions to you, really put you on the spot, and I'm really sorry that we weren't able to get to all of the students. It's really inspiring, though, for our staff, and I'm sure a lot of the adults in this room, to see that many students interested in wanting to be engaged in this type of conversation. I'd like to now introduce the Global Classrooms DC Student Secretary General for 2016. It was a very hard choice trying to narrow down who we thought we'd go to. We had a number of amazing applications, and I'm going to turn it over to Tima McDashie, and she's going to say a few words and start this conference off for you all. So a round of applause, please, for Tima McDashie.
First of all, I'd like to thank Ambassador Bliss, Mr. Rabens, and Ms. Penn for your inspiring words. Thank you also to our hosts, the U.S. Department of State and the Pan American Health Organization, and to all staff, volunteers, teachers, and advisors. Distinguished guests, teachers, delegates, welcome to Global Classrooms DC 2016 Model UN. 2 years ago, I sat where you are sitting today. In truth, I should say standing awkwardly in the back because our bus was late. I remember thinking when I got here, wow, this is serious. People are dressed up, and it kind of seems legitimate. It seems real. And I sincerely hope, delegates, that you don't doubt the reality of this conference, because it was a very much real experience for me. Unfortunately, like too many teens today, I've lived most of my life as a passenger, passively watching the world outside pass by, fly by, thinking that everything I saw beyond the clear glass was beyond my reach, and that either way, I'm too young to make a difference. I mean, how could I, a 15-year-old student, have an impact on the life of a human trafficking victim in Nicaragua? How could I change or help stop the melting of the Arctic when I'm right here in Washington, D.C.? But for the sake of the simulation, I pretended. I went, I read articles, I spoke to people, I got engaged and formed my own opinions. And during this conference, I was the driver, and I wasn't a passenger anymore. And come on, you guys, what teenager doesn't like the feeling of being behind the wheel? I liked it so much that I decided to stick with it. And what driver doesn't want to test his or her limits? So what would happen if I organized the Women's Day at my school? How could I help teens in my community? And before I knew it, boys, middle school boys, were holding signs with he for she at our school's first International Women's Day. And my standing here today and saying this to you now is a testament of the impact that this conference has had on my life. Today, as you will debate, you will argue, you will agree, most probably disagree, but hopefully re-agree. Either way, you will bring us one step closer to finding a solution to these complex problems that people all over the world are facing. I'm not saying that you're going to solve the situation in Syria or even manage to conserve the Egyptian pyramids until the end of time. But remember that no one has an answer to these complex questions yet. So that means that you could be the first ones to figure it out. Finally, I'd like to end with the very first words I uttered at this conference. Awareness is the first step to the resolution of any problem. And in that sense, regardless of what happens today, you have already succeeded by coming here, by choosing to be aware, because choosing to be aware is choosing to be involved. Thank you so much for joining us today, and best of luck. I now declare GCDC Model UN 2016 open.